Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and we're going to jump back into some more Onus. I have, if you have noticed here, moved up some of the troops, got them into a little bit closer formation so we can show some more stuff. And since I've got a bunch of other things that I still have to cover, this will be the last video on Onus. And trust me, it's not because I want it to be, it's because it has to be. I have other things that I have to cover, sadly enough. But I have had a good time with Onus. I did want to show you guys a couple other types of battles that I haven't really demonstrated so far, right? I want to touch on a little bit of everything. So we're going to show how those fights are going to work in the game and then go over some final thoughts about it. Okay, so for our purposes, we're just going to ignore the activation and movement section. I've already moved some units into the areas where I want them to be. We are going to start with a little bit of ranged combat, though. We're going with our Macedonians here, and we have these guys that are on this little hill here, okay? So that gives them a little bit of height. And one of the bonuses that you get from being on a hill is that you get to add a little bit of range to your unit. Our Macedonian guys here, looking at their stats, you see that their range stats is a 3. That parentheses 3 is their range, like I've said before, which means pretty much is range ruler, is their range. Well, normally they would be out of range of these Velitites or Velites, whatever these little skirmishers are over here. But here's the thing, when they are attacking at a hill, right? So they have the height advantage, they get to add 1 to their range. So they would add just that little bit more and put these guys in range so they actually can do a ranged attack against them. All right, so before we go ahead and roll for the attack at the range, we'll draw our event card, which will be, what is our event card? Come on, focus in. If your unit has Wall of Shields ability activated, if not already in use, unit receives half damage rounded down. Okay, cool. For these guys, though, that's not going to matter. They do not have a Wall of Shields, so useless event for them. So just like in real life, you'd want to get your ranged guys, your snipers, whoever, your archers up on a hill, give them that height advantage so they can put some rounds downrange on target. So that's what we're going to do here. Now remember, when they are firing, if they are firing up to like their maximum range, they only get to roll 2 dice. If they are firing at half their range or under, then they get to roll 4 dice. When it comes to melee combat, it's however many sides you have touching, that's how many dice that you're going to roll. With ranged combat, it's always going to be either the 2 or the 4 dice, just depending on what range it is. That number, again, at the front, right? So for these guys, it's a 4. That is going to be used like you would use it for melee here. Those first 2 numbers. For melee, you have 2 numbers. For range, it's just the 1. So here they would have 4 when they're looking to hit and 4 when they're looking to cause damage. However, looking at these skirmishers, they have 6-4. So their agility is a 6, their armors are 4. However, they're in forest. Forest effectively gives them a 1-1. They get a bonus to their defense when they are in some woods like this. So all of that is covered in the rulebook when it comes to the terrain, when it comes to the different bonuses that certain types of terrain are going to give, whether it's hills, forest, whether it's a fortress, whether it's a bridge, any of those special types of terrain that you can add to your battlefield are going to be covered there. Mainly, it's going to be things like reducing movement or gaining some type of defensive bonus, things like that when it comes to it. So, looking at our stats here, these skirmishers have 6-4, they're getting the 1-1 bonus, so they're effectively 7-5. With them having a 4, they get to add that 4 against the dodge, okay? And they need to beat that dodge, which means what? They need a 4 or better to hit. Since their dodge is pretty good, their armor's not that good though, so they don't need as great of a roll to beat that. So what is it? It's going to be 4 or better to hit, and then what is it? 2 or better. 2 or better to wound them. So let's roll our dice, see what we're going to get here. Oh, they did have 2 misses. 2 misses. They did nothing. Oh, they did so bad. Oh, I thought they were going to get a couple of hits through. But that will end our ranged combat here since they were not able to get any hits through. Unfortunately, these guys were able to dodge. They were ducking and weaving in the woods there and prevented any of that damage coming through. Again, don't forget to draw your event. I should have done that before I started my explanation here, but it is what it is. All right, so that will finish up our ranged example here. But again, like I said, we're just going over a few quick examples of bits of combat that I hadn't shown as much. One was the ranged and the extended range from the hill. Now, there are a couple of pieces of melee combat that I want to touch on as well. All right, so our next melee combat, or our next combat, which is the melee combat that I wanted to show, is this one over here. We've got our armed civilians ran up the hill, got to the top of it, they got to the other side. Now they're pushing down, and these spearmen have run up, and they are attacking these guys up the hill to stop them from coming down and charging the general over here. However, since the general is here, and he does have that 2, focus in, means units within 2 of the unit he is attached to get to have a bonus to their morale. So these guys would get that bonus when they are doing a morale check if they take any damage. More than likely, they're not going to take damage because these guys are armed civilians and they're pretty much garbage. I mean, they are only worth 20 points, the cheapest units I've seen in the game, so they're pretty much cannon fodder just to distract the enemy. All right, let's draw a card for our event, which is going to be the defender can avoid combat this turn if they add 1 to their unit, one wound. No morale check is needed. Now, normally we would probably do this to keep these guys from destroying them, but since I want to show this combat for a specific reason, we're going to ignore that event card. All right, so looking at our combat that is set up here, we have these spear infantry that are attacking the armed civilians up the hill. Now, they are in a phalanx formation. That gives them a bonus when they are in combat. Here's the thing. That allows them to have what is called a priority attack. So here's the thing, though. That bonus, that phalanx, that's lost after the first combat. So this only takes effect in this very first combat. Then you're going to remove that blue marker. Most of the blue markers have that type of effect, where they're going to be removed after the first attack. With the attack priority, though, attack priority means that they get to do their damage to the enemy. The enemy, if they take damage, has to make a morale check before they get to attack back. So they get to attack first rather than a simultaneous combat. Here's the thing, though, that changes it up a little bit, because your opponent can have attack priority as well. Armed civilians attacking downhill, any unit rather attacking downhill, gets a attack priority. With them having the attack priority as well, because they're attacking downhill, they get the bonus. That means they're effectively canceling out that phalanx attack priority. They both have attack priority, which means this is now simultaneous. There is another bonus that can be applied to certain units. These guys don't have it. The others do. Actually, I stand corrected. These guys do have it. I missed it right there, that tiny little icon. Let's actually pull these guys off so I can show you. That little spear, there's the first green spear, just a single spear, and then that little wall of spears there. That makes a huge difference here as well, because that changes what's called attack priority into, it's like a first strike thing. I forget the exact term they use for it. Yep. So I checked the name real quick just to make sure, and it's called single attack. So it changes what would be attack priority into single attack. So they get to now, instead of attacking first, they get to just attack. Flat out, no response from the enemy. That's what that bonus confers to them. If a unit that has that little spear icon that I pointed to you is in the phalanx formation, so they don't get it flat out, they have to be in a phalanx formation, then they get that single attack where they get to attack the enemy and the enemy does not get to attack back. So had they not had that little icon, this would have just been a simultaneous attack. But as it is, these guys are going to attack those armed civilians and potentially do some damage to them first. Armed civilians, like I said, are crap, so more than likely they wouldn't have got anything through anyway, but we'll see what happens to them. All right, so looking at it, they are normally, these guys are 3/3 on their attack stats. They're not as good as the other ones I'm getting ready to show you, but they do get a +1 for being in the phalanx formation, and our armed civilians here are 4/4 on their defense. So it's essentially 4/4 versus 4/4 because they're getting that +1 bonus, and then they have to perform their attack. So 4 gets added to whatever die is. So essentially we're looking for no ones. Ones are a critical failure. These units do not get the ability to reroll ones, but the advanced version of them do have that hero ability where they get to reroll ones, which would make it almost impossible for them to miss. All right, so let's roll for them. Oh, they actually got, look at this, 2 misses. Oh, that's so horrible. It's gonna be the same type of roll, seeing if they get any wounds through. And they did get 2 wounds through. So they are getting, for their morale check, they do have to do a morale check since they took some damage here. So let's roll for them. Oh, and they fail. They fail, they break. That is horrible. Well, they're civilians, so it's what you would expect. And just as an FYI, their morale was dropped down 2 points, -1 for each one of the wounds they had received. So it brought them down to a 4, and you have to roll if it's higher than their morale. That was a 6. That will cause them to break. And then if they are broken and they also lose their morale check, then they will go into flight. All right, so over here is the last combat I wanted to show you guys because this group had moved up and hit the side of these cavalry that were engaged over here and enveloped them on the rear. So they're hitting them on the flank and the rear, lots of negative modifiers being applied to them, and they're in the phalanx formation, and they had the Sarasu, which means they have that single attack. This is the one I was specifically looking at because they are the advanced infantry. They're 220 points versus the ones that I were just showing you, which are 90 points. So these cost more than twice as much, like 2.5 times as much as those others. They essentially have the same type of abilities as the combat we just saw, those spear infantry, with the exception that their stats are a fair bit better, and they have that heroic ability that allows them to reroll ones. What is that called again? Yes, they are professionals. Professionals get to reroll ones. And the way you are going to have combat like this, because these guys, these cavalry here, are engaged by these spear infantry and these cavalry, okay? In a situation like that, you don't double things up. You don't start adding and like rolling 8 dice or anything like that. It's just 2 individual combats that are resolved. So you would resolve this combat against the cavalry, and then if they survive, then this combat gets resolved against the cavalry. So you just do it individually with everyone that is engaged with the units. But you can have multiple units engaged with a single card at one time. And again, we talked about this in the previous video, but if you have a range guy like this one, he's not able to fire in unless you do have a special ability from like an event card or something to that effect. Speaking of which, let's draw our event card for this combat. And what do we get? The enemy makes a morale check with -1 after combat, even if wounds are not received. So that is that. See if they're going to break. But again, this is the one that I specifically wanted to show you guys, to show about the single strike. So that attack where they get to attack without the enemy getting to fight back. They just get to put that herd out there. Now they have 2 here on the flank and 2 on the rear. They are just enveloping the living shit out of these guys. All right, so with this combat, the Macedonians have a lot going for them in the fact that they are spear infantry, which get an automatic bonus against the cavalry, all right, mounted units. So these guys are getting a +1 to their attack stats. And these guys are getting negatives to their defense stats because they're getting -1 for an attack on the flank and a -2 for an attack on the rear. And those are cumulative, so that's going to be a -3 being applied to them. So let's go ahead and roll our dice for our single attack and see what we got going on. Still going to be 4 dice. We got 2 for this side here and then 2 for the envelopment on the rear. And yeah, that's going to do it. Let's see. The 2 might miss on this because they have 6 against. Oh, no, yes. Yeah, they blew it away. Only missing on 1s. So they got 4 hits on them. Let's see if we get enough to do it. Again, their armor's a 4, and they have a 6 here against it. So pretty much they're only not going to damage on on 1 critical failure, which again, they get to re-roll. So they have 2 chances not to fail on this. Oh! 2 1s. You gotta be kidding me. Look at this. Pull it in. They got the 2 1s. All right, so let's re-roll the 2 1s and see if they get a little more damage going through on them. And they got it. Yep. So they were able to get 4 hurts through onto these guys. All right, so we have applied our damage, but don't forget from our event, they're also getting a -1 there, and they're getting -1 for each wound that they have received at this point. That's 5, 6, 6 from their morale of 7. So, wow, that is not good on these guys. They will only pass their morale check on a roll of a 1, otherwise they will break. And they broke. Sadly, our cavalry are not sticking out, but we expected these guys to die anyway. All right, so that was the last bit of combat that I wanted to go over with you guys to show you some of the specifics. Don't forget, there are extra little bits that I just haven't been able to show you, things like special abilities that generals can add in, which thankfully someone did comment and let me know that one specific general that I was looking for just happened to be not included. You would use a generic because there are generic generals in there that you can use instead of me just picking out a good one to throw on there. But generals are cool to add to your armies. Just like you would see in Total War, they do have that leadership modifier that they have in a circle that they can apply to those troops in that radius and give them that little bit of morale bonus. As you can see, morale is key. You want to try to keep your troops from breaking as much as possible. Ultimately, when it comes down to the game of Onus, I freaking love it. I gotta say, it is awesome. I love the way the cards work as far as goes with simulating your troops. You don't have to sit here and paint up bunches and bunches and bunches of minis. You just have a huge deck of cards and a slew of troops available to you. See, like I said, here's a whole bunch of cards that are still in the box, all different types of units, different factions that can be added to the game. And for some reason, they gave a whole bunch of these, which I don't think they were really necessary, but it's kind of cool to have them for all the different factions that are in the box. And like I said, there's 2 different boxes with all the different types of factions that are in each box. So you can have 2 huge boxes just full of all these different types of troops and come up with all sorts of battles. Both campaign and scenario books are rather hefty with a just slew of different types of campaigns that you can play. Then you add in the fact that you have the terrain expansion. And I really do think the terrain expansion takes it to the next level, because it's one thing just to have the troops lined up in a big field, but when you can start adding in little tidbits, right? Like forests and hills that are going to apply those little bits of bonuses, or the coup de grace in having a siege fortress, right? You got a fortress set up and there are siege cards, siege units that can be used, the little battering ram things, bash down the gate. You can set that up. You can have that type of gameplay right here on your tabletop, and it works so well. I love that idea. Having archers lining the edge of the battlements, trying to fire down as the troops are coming in. The troops are trying to climb the little ladders so they can get up and fight on the battlements. They got a battle ram trying to push through. You can do all of that with this card game. And like you see here in the battles that I was playing out, just my little examples of play, it does behoove you to make smart choices. Things like mounted units smashing into your skirmishers, because they do a great job of taking those skirmishers out. But those mounted units are going to quickly crumble if units like spearmen get into them, especially if they get into their flanks or their rear. They'll start crushing them. I even get to show you guys one of the things I did want to show is if you come up, for example, here where these guys are flanked around, if a unit charges forward and smashes into that, these become gone, right? They're just smashed right off, and that's automatic wounds that get applied to the unit that had that little extension. So yeah, enveloping your enemy, your opponent, on its flanks or its rear is a great idea, but bam, if you smash into those and take those out, that's automatic wounds that get applied to the enemy unit or to the opposing unit. No roll, no dice, no nothing. You're just taking those hits right off the bat. It behooves you to make those smart plays, the mounted versus the skirmish, the spear versus the mounted, the heavy infantry coming in and trying to get into the spear infantry and chop them down. And then all the while you've got your general there in the center somewhere leading things, but even though he applies that little bit of a bonus to your army and you want to get him forward so he can help your unit stick in, if he gets taken out, that applies a negative bonus to your entire army. And now all of their morale is going to suffer for the rest of the battle. So yes, he is good to have up there, but you want to be careful because if you lose him, it's going to weaken your entire army. The only critiques that I'm going to really give to it is you do need to kind of clarify a couple things. The rule book wasn't 100% clear just because of the way it was translated. That's my opinion on it. Like I said, some of the aspects of it, like whether it's equal to or over, weren't established as clear as they possibly could. But again, I think that's like a translation nuisance rather than them making a deliberate error on the part. And they do have a errata that is available online that you can pull up. So they are doing their best to go out and correct any of those little minor issues that do pop up. As far as the solo play goes, I personally, now this is me personally, do not like the way that the solo rules were set up. I think it was just a little too unwieldy. I think the way that they have it for developing an army, right, figuring out what units are going to be there, great, cool, awesome. As far as the actual gameplay itself, no, I don't as much care for the way that they choose to do it because I think it would just extend the game out so much more than need be. I found my way of just drawing a random activation card for each side to get that random number, because you're not going to know whether it's going to be one unit, all units, 2 units, whatever, get activated on each side, and then you're just making your best choice and playing the game out like you do in so many solitaire games. So yeah, when it comes to the solitaire, the way that they have it for developing your forces, developing the scenario, what units are going to be there, perfectly serviceable, fine. The way they have it for the combat, personally, I like my way better. You are more than welcome to try both ways, see what works for you, or even come up with your own, because like I've always said, if you're playing it solitaire, you're playing it for yourself, and it doesn't matter who has fun with it besides you. But that will be wrapping us up when it comes to Onus. I really do hope you have enjoyed this series. I freaking love the game. I think it's awesome, and I do wholeheartedly recommend it. It is awesome, and we're trying, especially if you like that ancient style combat. It really gives you just so many options. The feel of a miniatures game without all the effort that goes into a miniatures game. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. You guys stay tuned. Like I said, I do have a playthrough series coming up on the Bitter Harvest, Lock and Load Tactical. I've got Heroes of Normandy coming up as well. And a special surprise game that I have gotten a code to that I cannot wait to show you guys out. It is very personal to me, and actually by the time I get this edited, you guys might have already seen it anyway. All right, that's gonna be it for me. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.